Hello and welcome back to the Comic Lyra podcast, the podcast that does deep dives into the best, worst, and midest of comic books, graphic novels, and sometimes mangas. I'm your host, the soon-to-be known as Comic Stan, and with me as always is my anthropomorphic co-host, it's Jamie.
Yo, what's up?
So the opening is going to change soon. We were just talking about it off air.
Yeah.
Because we already do a thing where I make you read comics that you wouldn't otherwise read. And I feel like,
I wouldn't read 90% of the garbage that I read for this podcast were it not for the fact that I did this podcast and had to do it.
Exactly.
I am a reluctant participant often.
And I realized that in my own content consumption, that
was a challenge, wasn't it?
You know when you're almost blank on a word, but I managed to snatch it from the jaws of defeat, like just in the last nick of time.
Well, I don't know if you did it in the nick of time.
I mean, I didn't lose the word. I didn't drop the sentence. That's the important thing.
You're right. That is the important thing.
You can extend the syllable to as long as you need before you just get the word back. I realized the content I watch, I really like it when people who don't like stuff are like, hey, you have to do this for challenge. As long as it's not like Fear Factor or the British I'm a Celebrity, kind of like, you have to eat a scorpion dick or whatever it is.
Scorpion dick? Do scorpions even have dicks?
Maybe. I don't know. I asked. I haven't asked them.
Google it. Find out. It's very important to me that we know whether or not scorpions have dicks right now.
All right. Well, in the meantime, I like when people are like, I don't really go for this kind of stuff. It's like, well, let's get your thoughts on it anyway.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Because it's also good when like a good bit of content for whatever it is, not like content, but like a good bit of fiction or whatever, television show, whatever. People are like, I'm not normally into this, but I really like this version.
And I think a central part of the appeal of making the podcast for me is the fact that I'm talking about something that I wouldn't ordinarily be speaking about. And so, you know, it's touching on new ground for me, and often I get to just vent the vehement rage that exists within me.
Also, scorpions do have testicles and a penis. So
wow,
yeah.
How big though?
Oh, I'm not getting into it. Quick Google search. That's it. I'm not clicking on links. So
what? You don't want Google to know that you've been thinking about scorpion dicks recently?
No, I don't have the mental capacity for it. I think that's the thing. Like maybe down the road, like I'm at an age, and you must agree with this, where you don't have the mental like space for information sometimes. Like someone's talking to you about something, you go, you know what? This has nothing. I have no interest in it whatsoever. I'm never going to come back to it. I need to save my mental load for things that are actually important in day-to-day life, you know?
I will admit, I am more strict with my information diet than I was when I was younger. That's
exactly.
Very true. Yeah, I am more stringent with my information diet than I was when I was younger, purely for that reason. However, I think as I've gotten older, I have a near endless capacity for wonder that has never gone away. I'm ardently of the opinion that if you scratch beneath the surface of any topic, you will find something fascinating. Everything is interesting. You just need to look.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it's again having like it's not even just the space in your brain to memorize something. It's literally like, do you have the current brain power to process information right now? What I'm saying is neither of us do right now. So
I'm a highly busy man.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, podcast intro is going to change at some point. You'll hear it. It's going to be like, what am I going to make Jamie read next? Like that kind of thing, that kind of vibe. But this week, we are focusing specifically on a very interesting title called Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. Now, that kind of evokes a thought of like, ooh, nice, cuddly, like sweet, cute stuff, right?
No.
Yeah, you'd be correct.
Well, so I've gotten into this habit of not even looking at the title of what we read.
Which I think is great because it gives you a real surprise on like the stuff.
So I open the comic, I open the title that I'm reading and I start reading. I don't look at the front cover, I don't really look at the title because, as we've established, I'm quite busy. I have a lot going on. And so I just start reading. And yeah, but I think that title is...
It's dual meaning, you know?
Well, it's certainly evocative of what the comic's actually about. And I think it sits in a really beautiful juxtaposition with what you get when you open it. But we're not quite ready to talk about the comic yet. So let's introduce our authors and artists and letterers and colorists and all of those people.
Absolutely. Well, what's interesting is this is a sole written and drawn piece.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, by someone named Patrick Horvath. And there is one additional credit, which I forgot to double check earlier, and I'm going to do it now with cutting out the space.
Of course.
but I will say their name first, which I am stalling for time before I bring up in front of my face again.
Ryan
And
Googling time is my favorite.
It's more clicking this time. But the lettering is by a Hassan Otsmane-Elhaou, and I'm going to double check that because that was familiar to me, and I think we might have read another title they've lettered. So I'm just going to double check that. 2 seconds. So I've just found why the name was so familiar.
Did he letter
The Cull?
Yeah, cool. Okay.
Yeah, so it was literally last week when I had to pronounce their name and did it again. I was like, I'm pretty sure I struggled on this name last time, and it's because they did The Cull. So good work on The Cull, and good work here as well, I think.
This could be a comic letter at first, where we've read something that somebody's worked on 2 weeks on the trot.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. So they probably get like an end-of-year medal, I'm guessing?
I think so. I mean, I'm probably going to have to do 2 years worth in one go.
Most consistent lettering of 2024.
Yeah, right?
Very specific.
Well, we definitely need to start working out the awards soon.
Yeah.
Like,
or is that more of a you thing?
Well, no, I mean what the categories are going to be. Because
yeah.
I felt last year categories were a bit rogue, a bit wayward. I think we could tighten it. I think we could go for like 2 or 3 title awards, really just knock it out of the park.
Shocked that you're going for structure over jazz.
Like, my life is just jazz all the way through. Sometimes I need a little bit of structure.
That's what you come to this podcast for, is the very strict structure we do.
That's why I come to Ryan, for structure.
Exactly. So, yeah, we'll do a lettering award. They'll probably get it because we've had 2 of their titles, which I think we've enjoyed. And 3, actually, because apparently they worked on Poison Ivy as well, which was previous
we read
episode.
that.
We did.
I liked that.
Yeah.
Ish.
It was an interesting one. It was a good one.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Great work. But I think a lot of the focus is going to be more on Patrick Horvath and their writing and art in this.
Yes. So, curiosity, when was this published?
This was published very recently. This actually the issue 6 just came out very recently. So
Are we hot on the press on this one?
This is a hot on the press for its final issue.
Wow.
Like it's been releasing over the past 6 months.
Okay.
But yeah, we're hot on the press of like the last issue. So yeah, we're setting the trend.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then who published it?
Published by IDW, who is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles publisher house.
Cool.
So they're interesting because they kind of have mainly that and one other thing, which I can't remember right now, but they have like only a very select few like main big name titles. So, but then it's good because they do a lot of other stuff like this. Like they take risks on hey, let's do this weird thing, which is most comic books that aren't Marvel and DC, let's be honest.
Yes.
But they're definitely they're nipping at the heels of Image, I think, for interesting titles.
Well, this has certainly put this writer and artist on my list of people to watch.
I'm guessing that's because you enjoyed the title.
It was, yeah, right? It's fantastic.
It was a great melding of genres, I felt.
So, would you like my synopsis on it?
Yeah, let's go for that.
Okay.
Jamie explains.
So, imagine, if you will, a 1960s or 70s children's book set in a quaint village with anthropomorphic animals. And then imagine one of those animals is a psychotic murderer who has been gradually dismembering people for 2 decades. And then somebody in the village starts murdering at home and it jeopardizes their safety. And they go on a tirade to find that person.
Yep, nailed it, I'd say.
It's so starting with the arting, if you'd like to...
I would just like to be just on the general, the whole concept.
Yeah.
Because I had the interesting thing where, so I'm already thinking of the title of the episode, what I'm going to sell it as. And last week, the call, it was it was Stranger Things meets Narnia.
Yeah.
We are doing a 2-week run of this meets this, these together, which I think is cool. It makes for very interesting stuff. In this instance, I was trying to think of what the anthropomorphic people aspect you could condense to a reference.
Yes.
So for British, so there's going to be maybe niche to some of the audience, it's very Wind in the Willows.
That's
right?
exactly what I was looking for and couldn't find.
And
yes.
I struggled with this as well. I was because it's one of those tropes and subgenre that you go, oh yeah, I know that. And then you try and recall specific references.
So a little bit Wind in the Willows, maybe a little bit Winnie the Pooh.
The American Winnie the Pooh's a good one. The American equivalent I found in literally the description of this title was a book series and cartoon called Busy Town.
Oh, I've heard of it.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
I just assumed it was a very American thing, which is not to say we don't get American things, but it's just some things we just don't get.
It's weird because certainly when we were younger, we had, like, in Britain, there was more local children's TV.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that we consumed as kids was British, wasn't it? And I think that changed by the mid to late 90s with the advent of satellite TV and Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network. We started to consume more American stuff.
There was more content being made in America, especially. And then there were people who were like, let's ship this to... and the reason literally that some countries got some other stuff, some things and other countries got other stuff, was the negotiation of like publishing rights.
Yeah, totally. It's
broadcasting rights.
It's syndication rights. Syndication, is what it's called.
Yes. Good word. Very good word.
It's not just a good word, it's the correct word.
It's a good word to say as well.
When you
syndication.
Well, but that's the process by which TV from one country gets moved over to another. It gets syndicated over.
Yes. And you can also say it in a very slow syndication. Like, enjoy the cadence.
Are you just elongating the syllables there to find your next word again?
No.
Is that what's happening?
Nah. Anyway,
nah.
The closest comparison I thought I could think of off the top of my head, and I think it's the one I'm going to use for the title, is BoJack Horseman. BoJack Horseman, have you seen that?
Yeah, but
so I think I'm gonna word your thoughts here.
You've made a jump.
So my thinking was, it was the first thing I thought of when I thought of anthropomorphic characters in a whatever.
Yeah.
But the thing with BoJack Horseman was, it's very obvious that it itself is parodying, satirizing, homaging that style. But that was before I even thought of Wind in the Willows and looked up Busy Town. So already I was like, I know this trope exists, and my only reference is the thing that I've seen that also parodies it.
I suppose the profound difference there is that BoJack Horseman takes the idea of anthropomorphic animals, but it's in a very modern post-Y2K, post-Family Guy animation style.
Yes.
Whereas this is very specifically drawn to look like children's books from that era.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And that is definitely why like Wind and Willows and Busy Town are closer, more accurate descriptions.
Yes.
I think I'm going to use BoJack Horseman just for the SEO of the title as well. So speaking of the overall vibe of it, like, as we say, melding of genres, and starting with the arting, I think, obviously got to do the theme tune as well,
The one that we do every week.
Yeah, the one we do every week, which goes, and we're starting with the arting, and we're going to talk about art.
You're getting there with it,
I think it's there.
Do you know, if I'd had more time today, I was going to look up the Bananas in Pajamas theme tune, learn it on guitar, and record one for you and bring it with me and play it on my phone at the podcast.
Eventually, once this podcast really takes off, we'll have some money for a soundboard, and then we could record those things, and I could just play them in front of me, like, and now we're starting with the arting. Press button, and we're starting with the arting, and we're going to talk about art, so...
Yeah.
That's the aspiration.
Like DJ Khaled.
Yes.
And another one.
Yeah, and just keep pressing over and over again until people switch off.
Well, the guy who does the F64 bars. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Like a Radio 2 thing, they get a rapper on to do like a fresh new 64 bars, and he always has like this soundboard, and it's like, Hadouken! And like...
I don't know that, but I know the Sway in the Morning. There's the American version probably started it. They had like freestyle on Sway, and rappers would come in and do like a freestyle to bars. It's not over freestyle. They wrote it beforehand, but they just like give it some music. It's like, here, fit it to this beat that you pre-requested.
Yeah, it's a fresh 64 bars. Yeah. Like, that's cool though. That's a vibe.
It's all the same stuff, yeah. So starting with the arting, the art is exactly what it says on the tin with the cover and the title.
Yeah, so it has a really vintage feeling illustration style. Highly reminiscent of children's fiction from, I would say, the 60s and 70s. This feels more like something to me that is evocative of what my dad would have been reading as a child, not what I would have been exposed to. I feel as though by the time we were children in the 90s, illustration in children's books had modernized a bit.
Yeah, we had sharp drawings or full-on like CGI, like completely computer-generated animations.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas this is really... And when I say children's content from the 60s, I mean like children's illustrated content.
Yeah.
Like children's books. And so this really reminds me of... The artwork here really reminds me of the illustrations that you would see alongside the words in, say, something like an early copy of Winnie the Pooh, or Watership Down again was an illustrated children's book, wasn't it, before it was made into a cartoon. And to be honest with you, I find that style really charming, and it's really well done here.
Yeah.
I think there's a really high level of consistency with all the character models, and again, it's hard to talk about this art style as comic book art because it's so different and it's so well worn.
Yeah.
You know, it has that cozy, nostalgic feel, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think what I really liked about it, and obviously I've got my notes, but the one thing I actually realized now as you were talking that I didn't make a note of, one of the things I think that really speaks to how well like this art style has been co-opted in a good way for this melding of styles is the facial expressions are normally, this kind of style is normally happy or sad. It's like happy when the good thing's happening and sad because you dropped your cake or whatever. And then it's like, oh, happy because someone's bought you a new one or whatever. Like that's the kind of stuff you're going for with these kind of facial expressions.
Yes.
In this, I think they were so good at having this art style with a character with a facial expression of quietly contemplating violence. Like,
yes,
accurately getting across that facial expression, which there's a lot of here in this world, seamlessly. I think, like, it didn't feel out of place. Like, it was all like very seamless with everything, with the art.
Yes, no, I agree with you there. And
I can make another point if you're stuck.
No, I was just waiting for whatever that vibration was in the flat to stop.
I probably didn't pick up on the mics.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you that was really interesting because the main character, Samantha.
Yeah, Samantha.
Samantha the bear.
Who's not really a Samantha. She's definitely more of a Carrie in this.
Hey! That is a top-class callback to last week's episode.
Yeah, she give me a running bit from now on.
Absolutely. Which character is the Samantha?
We have to work out who in the comic is what characters.
Yeah.
What Sex
Are we
and the
doing
City
it for
characters?
both the Sex and the City and the Turtles?
Well, we've already established that they line up. So you could, if you get one, that completes the Rubik's Cube and you get all of them.
Yes, it makes sense. Yes. Yeah. So I think the thing that we have to talk about is the sort of central gambit, almost. The gimmick of this comic is that art style is really incongruent with what's happening here. Yeah,
I made a note, like, basically encompasses that. Specifically, it's that most of this, like the established art style, is very muted colors. So very, like, nothing too contrasting. And then, inevitably, and you know this if you know the plot, which we've said already, as soon as you get that little bit of blood coming into it, the color of the blood is a high contrast red.
It's very red.
So as soon as a little bit comes in, it's all you can see on the page. And it's only then that I noticed, oh, we've only had these like mutal pastel colors up until now.
Do you know what's really interesting? I would imagine that though the artwork for those, those vintage books wouldn't have been that pastel.
Yeah, they probably made them more so.
Well, no, they are now. As they exist now, they all are very muted. But it's because of the yellowing in the paper.
Right.
And so they would have originally had that really bright coloration. And then because the only examples that we see now are muted, have muted tones because the paper's yellowed and the ink is faded.
Yeah.
We now associate that as a feature of the art style. And when you are parodying that art style, to make it congruent with it, you then have to use like a yellowed, muted tone for everything. And that's so fascinating, isn't it? That the way that physical things degrade affects our perception of them so much later.
Yeah, and they've done that exactly in this. They mute them like that, except for the blood. So then it becomes that layering of the genres. Looking at some of the panels now, I was going to ask you what you think like the coloring was, if it was like a watercolor maybe, and I was going to ask that because of the fading, but now that you've made that point, I go, oh, well, whether it is watercolor, I don't know, but now the fading of the colors is now very intentional.
Yes.
And could have been done with anything, really.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this doesn't... I wouldn't like to speculate on how this was drawn, if I'm being completely honest with you.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible that this is traditional, like ink on paper. I don't necessarily think it's watercolor.
No, I was more thinking of just something where the color looks a bit more faded in parts than others.
Well, yeah.
But now that you've, as I said, made your point, I think it was very intentional with however they were actually making it. It was like intentionally fading, which is a level of detail which does carry on through this whole comic. But it's just a good bit to point out.
No, I completely agree with you. The whole thing is really detailed.
There's some rough line work as well, which I think is, again, very in line with like the originals being hand drawn by people.
Absolutely. Because this is certainly looking to imitate the way that ink on paper would then be reproduced and printed.
Yeah.
I understand what you mean about that kind of very painterly muted palette. And I suppose one of the ways that one could get at that is through watercolor. But I think here it's ink on paper that they're trying to mimic.
Yeah.
The charm of it for me is how incongruent the art is with what's happening on the page. And I think the first issue, they were working up to that shock reveal, weren't they?
Yes.
And do you know, it got me because I knew something bad was going to happen because I knew this was a relatively modern comic. And so I was seeing Samantha go through the neighborhood and I was like, something bad is going to happen to Samantha. And then it turns out Samantha is a psychopathic serial killer.
Yes.
And that was the most fantastic reveal. It hooked me instantly.
And speaking of the serial killer aspect of this, that is quite a general trope in itself, like especially modern media is all, TV crime and film.
We're obsessed with serial killers.
Yeah.
True crime podcasts, true crime documentaries.
Yeah. What I noticed with this is it's a very specific influence by Dexter. Have you seen Dexter?
Not for a long time.
So the Dexter aspect of this was very telling to me. Again, not in a way, we had this comparison with Void Rivals and The Cull, where I was talking about how when you see the influences, it was a little bit here. I was like, that's from Dexter, like this specific part, but only a couple of moments. Not enough that I was like, oh, they're just stealing moments from Dexter. Like it's still its own thing.
Yeah.
But the point of, and again, this reveal is at the end of the first issue. We'll hold off the second half spoilers because that's like a whole nother thing. So I think we'll talk about mainly like the first 3 issues story, that kind of stuff first.
Yeah, but, I suppose this is one where the plot is really important because it's part slasher fic, part detective novel. Really, there's a noir element here, isn't there?
Yeah, and that's the Dexter element. Is Dexter season 1 especially is he introduced to a serial killer, but he only kills killers himself. And then he is basically contacted in this interesting way by obviously another serial killer. And it becomes this cat and mouse, but there's also a playfulness to it, but then it becomes more serious. So this issue 1 is very Dexter influenced. It went its own way afterwards. So I'm happy for them to borrow those influences, especially when they're already mixing genres, but very Dexter influence in the beginning. One thing I wanted to talk about, I would get your input on, was the portrayal of a serial killer as a protagonist. And again, coming back to Dexter, one thing I noticed was, and with this and Dexter, there's certain ways and rules to establishing a serial killer as a protagonist where it's not a full-on, not even anti-hero, but just story featuring an evil protagonist, if that makes sense. So
I think the important thing here is that we're not invited to identify with Samantha. And Samantha is portrayed as an unlikable protagonist very early on. We see Samantha commit a murder in issue 1.
Yes.
And we see Samantha commit a brutal murder. And I think for me personally, there's something more brutal about a cold, calculated murder than there is a murder of passion.
Yeah, definitely.
It's all murder. Yeah. And on a legal standpoint and a moralistic standpoint, it's all murder.
We can empathize with getting so angry at a person that you want to kill them. Like that's you can empathize with that. Like you're angry in the moment and you think things you wouldn't normally think.
That's an animalistic human thing.
Yes.
But, so the murder that we see, Samantha drives into the nearest big city because she does not commit murders in her local area.
And that's very Dexter because that's a serial killer with rules to avoid getting caught. So They're meticulous, they're calculating, that kind of thing.
So she drives into the nearest city. She abducts somebody. She uses a tool to kill their central nervous system. And then she takes them to the wood. She portions them out into pieces and she buries them in paint cans in the woods. That is a chilling murder. That is a calculated murder. That is so much. That is more meticulously planned and cold than anything you will see in a true crime podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we are presented here with a character who's clearly really psychotic. I think the fun is that they are playing as being an upstanding member of their community. And to be honest with you, taken on a certain level, they are an upstanding member of that community because everybody in that community is safe from them because they've decided that to maintain their own safety, they have to not kill there, right?
Well, so that, and as they're talking about the rules, again, like Dexter, which I'm going to keep saying through this because it merits it, they don't kill in this small village that they live in because, as we establish, as it's revealed, a murder in this small village is the main news for months afterwards.
Yeah.
Like, it's the thing everyone will be talking about and scared of and, shook by. In the city, it's just a person going missing.
Yes.
And that's, like, the difference.
And it happens all the time.
Exactly.
So I think the idea of having a serial killer as the protagonist is the only way this kind of story would have worked.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that again, they are going from the starting point of nice anthropomorphic characters and Dexter. Like, those are the starting points. The point I found very interesting was how they kind of have these little bits of information that excuse it a little bit to make him, the character, more palatable as the protagonist. So in Dexter, it's he kills killers, the whole thing. So he's a character he adopted by a police officer who realizes because of the things that are revealed about the character, they have this psychopathy in them. And he sees like the torturing animals as a kid signs, like classic serial killer pre-stuff. So he gives him this set of rules of like, here's how you can survive and still do what you need to do. And part of it is only killing killers because, one, normally people who have killed and on the radar of the police, if they go missing, it's, well, they just ran away. So it's that part. It's also the morality aspect of, well, they were a murderer themselves, so it's more agreeable to society than if you killed an innocent person. So those kind of rules.
In some circles, it would be celebrated.
Exactly. So those kind of rules make it like, here's how you can root for the protagonist of Dexter.
That's not what's at play here, though.
No, and this was the point I was going to make, was what I noticed was the thing that they are attempting to make their version of that. In this, it was that once the Samantha captured this person, chloroformed them. Also, nice little detail, like the person is a duck and the chloroform goes over the bill.
Yes.
Not like in other things less thought out, the hand would just go in the same place and they wouldn't think about it. In this, she literally covers the sides of the bills with the chloroform rag.
Which is where the nostrils are on a bird.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then she makes a point of saying that once they're unconscious, she hammers a nail into a part of the brain, essentially, which just kills them instantly, making the explicit point, no pain, they don't feel anything, whatever. And the only reason the character's doing that is because it's to avoid mess and complication.
Yes.
You just want to, all she wants is the kill. She's not there for the torture or anything like that. But I think that was very intentional to the audience to be like, they're not causing pain. They're just murdering them like painlessly.
I disagree.
Okay.
I think that was solely there to show how cold and calculating she was.
I mean, yeah, I think it was both.
And that's so weirdly, I've read another piece of fiction where somebody who kills has that same MO. It's a book by a Japanese author called Haruki Murakami, who I adore and who everyone should read. And he wrote a book where basically there was this woman who was a really fantastic masseuse, like a sports masseuse.
All right.
And she fell in with this really wealthy older woman who ran a sanctuary for women who were victims of like sexual and domestic assault. And Aomeme, her name was, named after green peas in Japanese. She ended up becoming an assassin for this older woman, and she would go and kill abusive men. So when the older woman got wind of a man who was abusing women, she would send in Aomeme, and Aomeme would either go in as a masseuse to massage him or would find some reason to go in and would take a really, really fine needle, straight into the back of the neck, going through the cerebellum, I think it's called.
Right.
And noise. And so this is a trope. I've seen other fiction where they've used this same idea.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, you can quickly and painlessly kill somebody if you go into this right spot with a fine enough tool. But again, it's sort of there's something of the assassin in that, isn't there?
Yeah.
The thrill is in the control of taking the life for Samantha, not in the struggle or anything else. And Samantha says it quite clearly. Like she doesn't get off on the violence, she gets off on the control, right?
True. I think that's put in I think the real reason is to make him more palatable as the protagonist. And that's just my opinion.
I don't know, because...
But I agree with you, like all that stuff, all you've said is correct. But I think it's in there to justify why she does it for her own needs.
But Samantha is a distinctly unlikable protagonist.
But I think, in my opinion, I think she'd be even more unlikable if the victim... because you need an example victim. We needed to see what she does to establish the stakes going on. I think she'd be even more unlikable if this victim was like crying and in pain and, do you know what I mean? Like terrified. I think that would make her even more unlikable. The fact that they kind of go a roundabout way to be like, they didn't feel anything, they had no idea what happened, they just gone to sleep and never woke up. Like,
potentially, but I don't think it serves that function. I just disagree with you.
That's fair.
I don't think it serves that function. I think it's really there to show us, to give us a sense of how efficient and competent she is. Because that's one of the overarching aspects of Samantha's characterization, right? How competent she is. Even before you see her kill anybody, you see her running her business and just without even considering it, noticing everything that everybody else is forgetting. Oh, Charlie, your clipboard's upside down. Oh, you forgot this. You missed that. You didn't do that.
Yeah.
And so it's underlining that competence that we see in her.
Yeah. And again, everything you say, I'm already agreeing with. I just have this extra dimension, which, again, you just disagree with. And that's fair dues. I think the discussion is why we're here. It's what we're doing. But so, I think it's an interesting aspect anyway. Yeah.
One of the things that I found really interesting about the story is that on some level, Samantha is doing the right thing by trying to work out who this murderer is. But she's doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, which makes for an interesting protagonist.
Well, exactly, because you're really supporting her goals the whole way through reading this. The whole way through reading this, you're kind of thinking, yes, I'm objectively pleased that you're going on this journey to find who this killer is, but also I know you're doing it for completely the wrong reasons.
And another aspect of why that is, I think, is because we've been introduced to the townsfolk. We don't care about the city people. Like, we see the city people. We're never introduced to them, not really. But the townsfolk, we know their names, we know what they do, who they are. I think that's all. I think the author's kind of meticulously planning things out, much like the protagonist in their story, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe we need to worry about this guy.
I'm not saying he's a serial killer. I'm saying he just writes a good one, and that is suspicious. But
well, it is a bit suspicious, isn't it?
Yeah, but Stephen King isn't a bloody demon. Like, we know that much.
Is he not?
Well, we don't know. Now that I've said it out loud, I'm second guessing myself.
That man writes a lot. I'm just saying that to have an output that great. I'm not saying that I like everything he writes. I said great in terms of volume, not quality. But to be able to put out as much as he does, are you sure he's not signed a little sneaky deal with some kind of demon or devil?
Well, he himself said early in his career that it was cocaine. So
really?
Maybe the deal with the devil was he wanted to stop the cocaine, but he knew he needed something. He's like, maybe I need to sell my soul. Like,
did he do a lot of Charlie?
I'm almost certain that he has confirmed that. Like, as a young establishing writer, he was writing a lot and he was doing a bit of coke as well. Not anymore, apparently. Like, as far as I know. Again, if I'm wrong, feel free to write in and correct me. But yeah, pretty sure that is the case.
Fair.
He still writes a lot, so it's, he's replaced it with something. Maybe it's clean living. Maybe it's bloody Beelzebub. Who knows?
But I think we have to get into the last half of the story because for me, it's the most interesting.
Well, I'll tell you, I've got a couple more points of the first half and then we'll get into it. I think one thing, this is a very emotional reaction to reading it. I was really affected by that first, sample kill of Samantha's. Yeah. It really stuck with me. For one, striking visuals that splash page towards the end of the first issue really stuck with me, which was basically the mid dissection of the character. Dismemberment. The reason it stuck with me so much is one little detail that may actually support your argument for not actually wanting to, that like there not being any desire from the author to make the character more likable or not. She literally baits in a victim who, because they're a good Samaritan.
Because they're nice.
Yeah. That bit really stuck with me. Like, there's, you see in a lot of stuff, and again, coming back to Dexter, all his victims are killers. So you're like, you go do your thing, Dexter. Like, they're evil bastards.
But this guy's just like a cool looking duck with a nice jumpsuit.
He's like a young 24-year-old, I think you see on a missing person poster later. But yeah, he's a young guy who's just like, oh, you need help? I'll help you. And then he dies and he gets killed for it, which is why I advocate for never speaking or being nice to anyone who isn't in your immediate circle.
Yeah.
Because you might be murdered. But that really did stick with me. Like, after reading it, I kept coming back to it. And I think it was the combination of the writing of the situation, like I said, and going from this nice person's being unfairly chloroformed to now they're in pieces on the floor and being buried, and their family's never going to know what's happened to them. You know?
And not only are they in pieces, but yeah, we're catching it, as you say, mid-dismemberment.
Seeing the cross-section of their head.
The cross-section of the head is powerful.
Yes.
The missing limbs are powerful. Yeah, it's dark stuff, isn't it?
And that's why I kind of struggled with this idea of like, do you support the protagonist in Samantha? And then, to be fair, it does just get kind of removed further from that original kill. But it then comes back to a later, which I thought was very good. There was a moment, so the reveal at the end of the first issue is someone orchestrates a reveal of a dismembered member of the town.
Yes.
Old Goat, who they do a lot of fun. Like,
he's an old goat, yeah.
Yeah. The police officer is a bloodhound, which is very, very funny. But this character reveals them, and then they are all the town are at this funeral for this character later. And Samantha is having this inner narration, which is another part. Well, I'll talk to her in a second. But she's having this narration. She's literally just pondering about like, yeah, I suppose all my victims probably didn't even have this because they didn't discover the body. So maybe they had worse because they didn't have, the
body to bury.
Yeah, they didn't have the closure.
But then she also said, I imagine the person is here. The person who did it is here, and I bet they're loving it. Yes. And everyone has to bow their heads.
Spoilers for what Jamie's about to say.
And then she looks around and sees her best friend's son is the only person looking around at all the suffering.
That's not the reveal. So the reveal is the allergy to lavender.
Oh, that he's, yeah.
Yeah. So, spoilers for that part. I might chop in a bit like, spoilers for what Jamie's about to say. And then, but we are in it now. But, yeah, there's her pondering like I wonder how my victims' families kind of felt. Is just literally like a pondering. It's not guilt. It's nothing like that. It's just like, And so that kind of makes a bit, it reminds you like, this is who the protagonist is. Like, this is how they feel about the situation. So I will admit, I appreciate the braveness of the author to be like, this is how evil the main character is who you're rooting for. And again, like other medium where killers are protagonists and they're killing people, but the people they're killing are like assholes. Like, not even necessarily killers like Dexter, but it's just like prime example, Hannibal Lecter in all the Silence of the Lambs and all those. A lot of people he kills are assholes.
Well, I think Inglourious Bastards is a really good...
Well, I'm talking about specific serial killers. But yeah, killing in general by protagonists.
Yeah.
But this one, I think it was brave of the author to be like, no, she is killing like just nice, innocent people. And now she's just got an issue with another serial killer.
So there's one thing that I want to talk about before we get towards the end.
Sure.
And the utter depravity that is the end. There's something I don't know if you'd have clocked this, but it was something that really stuck with me after reading it. So after that, the sample murder that we see, Samantha sees that bear.
Yeah. That moment, I was like, oh, there's normal animals in this.
So this is interesting because when you anthropomorphize animals for fiction, particularly this kind of fiction, you have to then make a decision as to whether or not there are anthropomorphized versions of those animals that also exist. And here we see a very beary looking bear.
Yeah.
And so we have to assume that there are bears that also exist. And, you know, sometimes when you anthropomorphize animals and then you put a real animal next to them, you take the Disney approach.
Yeah.
Where like Goofy and Mickey aren't really aware that they're animals, but they know that Pluto's a dog, right?
Yes. Whereas
here she self-identifies as a bear. So we know that she's a bear and we see real bears. And then later on, after she has been partially framed for some of the murders that you just mentioned that happen in the town, she comes across the bear and she sees it with blood on its muzzle and she greets it and says, "Oh, I know you." And then she sees it fighting another bear and she really starts to get off on it.
Yeah.
Like, she starts to get off on the violence. And often people who try to normalize violence will suggest that it's a natural part of our nature and it's part of our nature as animals, right? But I think this does something really fucking interesting. And I'm swearing because I think it is really interesting. And I think it's part of the central observation of the text, which is that Samantha as a bear should be out there killing ducks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like killing prey and fauna would be part of Samantha's nature as an animal, right? And she sees those two bears fighting in a deeply natural, animalistic way. And it really tickles the part of her brain that I assume also likes killing. But it's juxtaposed against the way that she kills.
Yes.
Which is very human and meticulous. And I think that was the central observation of the text for me, is that violence is a natural part of life and it is a natural part of the animal kingdom. But often as humans and as, you know, creatures with consciousness and a sense of mortality, the way that sometimes human beings kill each other, there's nothing natural about it.
No, not at all.
There is nothing natural about systematically preying on members of your own species. It's not like watching two bears have a territorial fight. It becomes about more than that, doesn't it? And it becomes this sort of grim, twisted thing that you take pleasure in. And I thought that the juxtaposition between the way that Samantha, as a brown bear, was killing other creatures, and then seeing the more overt animalistic violence of the more kind of normal, of the less anthropomorphized bears, I thought that was a really fascinating observation that was being made.
Yeah.
And that can't have been a mistake, right? That has to have been so purposeful, because it's
literally the moments of like, here's the meaning. Like, here's the metaphor.
Yeah, and do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, 100% agree with you. Like, I think that is the point of the text. I think that's issue 5 is an entirely introspective issue for Samantha, which is important. It feels like the one where there's no plot, or there's not as much plot, but it's like the character arc issue, essentially. But that's where a lot of that stuff happens. I do think that us making the presumption that, oh yeah, animals only kill for like animalistic reasons, it's only humans who kill in this meticulous way. I feel like if we were to say that, we would get some kind of amateur anthropologist turn up going, actually, putting the glasses up the nose, and they'd have some example of like, actually dolphins are sometimes serial killers, you know?
Probably wouldn't be an anthropologist.
Yes, one of those.
Anthropologists study humans. Probably mean a zoologist.
But they would be the ones who'd be like, actually, other animals do like humans do, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. Neither of us know enough.
It's really interesting, you know, because this book does invite us to think about violence and the nature of violence. And of course, animals are violent creatures. Like, there's certainly species of simians that wage war. Like, I forget if I'm talking about monkeys or apes. So I'm going to say, there are species of monkeys or apes.
Primates.
I know chimps do it, and I know chimps aren't monkeys, are they? They're apes.
I have no idea.
They are, yeah.
You'd have to ask an anthropologist.
Fuck off.
They might know.
They might know.
That's the evolved from
most. You know, all of the anthropologists I've had the misfortune to be sat next to at dinner have been quite well-read people. You know who you are. That's entirely a joke.
They're definitely listening.
Chimps are apes. And there are colonies of chimps that will wage war with other troops.
Right.
And so, yeah, animals do perpetuate violence, but I think animals generally perpetuate violence either in the interest of gaining one of three things. It's calories, sex, or territory.
Yeah.
And really, territory is about having access to calories and sex, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Samantha here isn't killing for any discernible reason. She is doing it for pleasure. Yeah. She's doing it for the quietness that it gives her in her brain. She's doing it for the peace of mind that she gets from it.
Maybe not so much pleasure as relief. It feels like a build up, and this is the thing she does too. As she describes it, as like the feeling of control quietens the voice in her head, essentially. It's almost like feeding an addiction almost.
Yeah, well, yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And I suppose she goes about it with the grim methodology of somebody who has managed to maintain an addiction that hasn't cost them everything else in their lives.
Yeah.
Like there's something that has always really fascinated me, and it's the idea of like white collar heroin addicts.
Yeah. It's this kind of story it's the functional addict who is starting to tumble into dysfunctional. And it's almost a bit inevitable in some stories.
Well,
isn't it?
It's an existential factor. That's the thing. The one thing that she couldn't plan for was an existential factor encroaching upon her world. And she talks about not liking change because, of course, everything in her life has to be planned so meticulously so that she can continue with this habit.
And it's the feeling of control on her life. Like,
yes.
That's the control over it was the Norm Macdonald had the joke, like a long joke about like why serial killers always leave their victims in like a shallow grave. It was like always reported like their body was found in a shallow grave. It's like he goes through this entire thing of like all the preparation they do, everything like to build up to this moment. And he describes the moment, it's like, and then you do that thing where you feel like God, and just like casually describing it as like that. It's like, and then you just leave them in a shallow grave. But it's literally that. It's that feeling of control to control over your environment, which I think people day to day people have in their ways.
Yeah,
it's just for this character, it's literally feeling like God and like a domain over life and death and that kind of stuff.
And it's interesting. So the later stages of the story, it's essentially revealed that Samantha has one friend, and her son has been looking after her, and he had some murderous thoughts. And he was really fascinated by Samantha because she'd left the village, hadn't she? She'd moved away from the village and come back. So in comparison with everyone else from Woodbridge, is it called?
I think so, yeah.
She was very worldly. And so he became really interested in her, started following her, and watched her kill somebody, basically.
He had a bit of like, everyone else is a phony except you and me. And I was like, all right, Cawthorne, like, calm down.
Yeah, wow.
Bloody J.D. Salinger, for those who didn't know. Bloody Catcher in the Rye, sit down.
Oh, you said, right, I did wonder who you meant. You meant Caulfield.
Yeah, that one.
Holden Caulfield.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like them in the damn movies. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, there is something precocious about him, isn't there? I didn't like him at all.
No, and you're not meant to, are you?
Well, he's a fledgling serial killer.
And he's the antagonist.
Yeah, and he is and it's interesting, isn't it, that we have this person that has been like taking loads of young lives, and then this dumb kid who can only kill the old goat and the what is Charlie?
Mole, I think.
Yeah, like
because he's always talking about his glasses. Like moles can't see very well.
Yeah, so he manages to kill the old goat and the blind mole
and the pig woman who's a pig.
Who, let's be frank here, was a massive bellend.
And this is the thing I was saying before of like that trope is what a lot of things use, again with like Hannibal Lecter,
yeah,
where a lot of the people he kills like, yeah, he's a killer and he's eating people, but that person was a real asshole. Like,
well, the pig was distinctly unlikable.
Yes, exactly.
Prototypical Karen is the only way I can describe it.
Literally, yes.
But don't go killing Karens, because Karens are people too.
Yeah. And some people are just named Karen and then they're all right.
Like, I know. Imagine just like, because to be honest with you, you don't meet many millennial or Gen Z Karens, do you? It's mostly Gen X. It was a very popular name in like the mid to late 70s, right? Or like late 60s to kind of early 80s. Imagine just being quite a nice woman called Karen, and then suddenly your name becomes a byword for being an absolute monstrosity.
Yeah, I'd feel bad about it. I'd feel worse if it was Ryan, as you would about Jamie, I think.
Well, I had a thing with my name the other day.
Really?
Yeah. So it was basically somebody started bombarding me with content of people going out and asking people in the street what names are a red flag.
Right.
They all said Jamie. Apparently the J names are an issue.
Wow.
And so, yeah, my name is universally considered to be a red flag in dating. That happened to me. Like, apparently J names are the problem, specifically Jamie.
Are you considering changing your name now?
Yes.
Any potential...
Horatio.
That's a pretentious name.
Is it?
See, it's pretentious name, but like you have pretentious parents if you're born with it. You choose it yourself. You are solely pretentious.
Look, Nelson is our county's greatest son.
Yeah, but like if you go back to like if you're Greek and you're like, I really like bloody. I was thinking of Caesar, but then he literally remembered he was Roman. So if you were Italian, you'd be like, say it still applies.
Would you like to re-record that bit?
No, not at all.
Do you mean like...
Because we're real.
Yeah, I mean, if you were Greek and you were like, I'd really like to be called Sophocles. Although I think no, Sophocles isn't a common Greek name still, is it?
If you weren't Latin American and you were like, call me Jesus.
Yeah, right.
That'd be like, you're really pretentious there.
Although Jesus is like Maria in Latin American countries.
Yeah, but it's Jesus. And that's what I mean.
But no, what I mean is, like, I knew somebody and her and, like, maybe 3 of her cousins were all called Maria.
Right.
But they all had middle names that were actually their given name.
Right.
And that's the same with Jesus. So your first name will be Jesus, but no one actually calls you Jesus. They all call you the middle name that your parents also gave you that's your actual name.
Right.
And so it's like Maria's a really, really common family name in Latin American countries. And so they'll all be called Maria, but nobody actually calls anyone Maria. Like it's all of their legal name, but no one actually. And I think it's the same with Jesus, where you'll name your son Jesus, but he'll have a middle name, and that's what you actually call him.
Well, some people just go by Jesus because that's the only reason I've heard of it at all.
I mean, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, some people. But again, that seems less. I don't know. I don't know nearly enough about the culture to comment on. You clearly know more than me, so I'm just going to take whatever you say and go, cool.
Yeah, I mean, this is solely based on conversations with a friend I had from Colombia.
Yeah, which fair enough. One thing I think we should have talked about earlier, and I just forgot because I wasn't looking at my notes, but the narration I thought was a very good level for this. Subtle.
There was enough of, there wasn't too much of it.
But the narration also was used to get across little plot points. I think it was used really interestingly. For example, used sparingly, which immediately love it.
Yeah.
The end, when it all goes to shit towards the end, at the end of the first issue, and the reveal is, well, the town is fucked because they've discovered a body and it's obviously a serial killer.
Yeah.
That's Samantha, her internal monologue that is the narration, uses the first swear of the title, where she goes, I didn't know it down, but something like, things are fucked now, like that kind of. I think she was fucking, but I can't remember.
And there was very light swearing throughout after that.
Yes,
but it was always very impactful because it was used sparingly.
Yeah,
it was my favorite use of swearing in fiction. Because even though I swear gratuitously, and I'm a very sweary person. You know, what's
part
that?
Of the culture.
Well, it is. Yeah, absolutely. I'm from rural England. You know, in Bruges. Yes. There's that character that just swears. Film. Yeah, Ranulph Fiennes' character.
It's Ray Fiennes.
Fiennes,
but it's Ralph.
Ralph, yeah. You know Ralph's character.
Yeah,
who just swears constantly.
Yeah,
I don't like that. Like, I just think it's cheap.
No, but you know what's great? A version of that. Ray Fiennes' character, or Ralph, in Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yes,
when he swears, it's after ages of not swearing, and it's not only impactful, it's hilarious.
Yeah,
because he keeps that stiff upper lip British accent.
Yes.
So he's like, "Oh, terribly sorry about that, man. What can I do to help?" And then later he's like, "Oh, surely you can let me and my fellow just go ahead." And they're like, "No, sir, we can't." It's like, "This is a fucking disgrace." Like, it's really good use.
And I think so. I don't find gratuitous swearing to be that good. Or when I say good, I mean that impactful a story device. Because do you know swear words are kind of magic?
Yeah, they elicit like reactions in the brain.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And they think that swear words are like stored differently in our brain. And so they live in the inner part of our brain, the oldest parts of our brain, the parts of our brain that we had when we were animals, in evolutionary terms. And so they are magic, and they lose their magic if you overuse them. And so the swearing here being reserved for really impactful moments. And again, it builds onto that incongruence between the art style and the story, right?
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't see like a cutesy looking anthropomorphic animal dice somebody up and then swear. But you do. You get to have your cake and eat it with this, don't you?
But then there are a lot of recent decade, there's been a lot of that trope that like they're cute cartoon characters, but they swear like you remember Drawn Together?
I do.
Was that and that they just were that from the start. So you were just like, okay, the gimmick's worn off like immediately. This parcels it out so meticulously, which again, another word we used a lot for this, that when it happens, you go, oh my God, I forgot they swear. And you reminded me again. Another great use of narration, because it's that drawn like on lined paper background, which is a common, I've seen that in a lot of stuff. But there's one particular moment, I haven't seen it anywhere else, where Samantha crosses out a word.
Yeah.
And it's the line where she's talking about the kill and what it does for her.
Yeah.
And she says, I think she originally writes, it silences the voice in my head, but then she crosses out silences and put quiet.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
she kind of, in that just little visual signifier, you get across like she corrects herself to be like, well, it doesn't completely stop her. It just mutes it, like it reduces it for a while, but it will come back and I'll do this again.
Yeah.
Like you read all that in just a line out and a replacement word.
And, you know, she says that over how many kills? She's done 40 kills over like 20 years
43,
or something.
I think, yeah.
So it's like, you know, she's killing once every 6 months, which is quite frequent.
Yeah, for kills, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So issues 5 and 6, the end game. So her friend's son successfully frames her for the murders by using actual evidence from her past murders and leaving it dotted around in places in her life. She accidentally gives somebody a blood-tainted paint can.
Well, someone else also almost does, and she notices the blood and goes, oh, hang on.
This one's been mixed or whatever.
Yeah.
And so she goes on this big introspective journey that we've touched on earlier. But I think the end game really hammers home to me the level of ice in this character's veins. Because, you know, she goes to the city, she exists in the city for a little bit trying to remain anonymous, and then she comes up with a plan, and so she heads back to Woodbridge. And it's that moment for me that I'm thinking, well, this character clearly isn't going to turn herself in. Like, she has gone to such great lengths to cover up what she's been doing. That after 43 years, you can't be turning yourself in.
No, she's not going to.
And so she heads back to Woodbridge and she basically instigates this end game, doesn't she?
I think even that, I think in this scenario, she feels more offended by, I think she'd be caught by on her own terms, like, or her own mistake. She'd be like, you know what, fuck it, like, I had a good run, like, I'll run maybe. But in this, it's a personal affront that someone else has come in and done this to her.
And she says, and there's this scene in issue 5 where you see her in the woods facing the dismembered body of her last kill, and stood behind her watching are her friend's son and the police inspector. And she sort of says, oh, he watched my moment.
Yes.
And it's like he infiltrated this sacrosanct space that she builds for herself when she kills.
And something happened that was out of her control.
Yeah, which is like, the level of, I can't describe how much that chills my blood.
Yeah.
Somebody who is that sort of aggressive but quietly violent.
Yeah. They've really gone across the prime driver behind everything that she does is control. It's not sadism. It's not sadism. It's not sexual or anything like that, which a lot of real world killers and it's control over her and her world, the world around her, like, and how she can achieve that. And again, it's playing God. So yeah, they were very consistent in that theme.
But it leads her to break her rule.
How so? I mean, I believe you, but go, like, explain.
Well, so she goes back to...
Actually, I don't believe you, but explain.
She does break her rule.
Yeah.
She goes back to Woodbridge and she lures her friend into her home. And she essentially tells her friend that your son is a serial killer. And her friend says, yeah, I know. And then she sort of says, well, do you know about me? She said, yeah, I've known for a long time. And she sits her friend down on the sofa under the guise of talking to her about it, stabs her in the chest, lures the son there, drugs him, and then frames him for the murder of his own mother and his own suicide.
So the killing someone in the town is the rule breaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I believe it. Yeah.
She
I believe it. I agree with you.
She commits a double murder in the town.
Yeah.
And that is the most sadistic shit I've ever seen. The way she's talking to the son while he's doing it.
Yeah. She enjoyed that one.
Yeah. And so the whole way through this murder, she gives him a drug that means that he no longer has muscular control, but he is still conscious. Even if he's not feeling pain, he's conscious.
Yeah.
And initially with her murders, they are short, sharp, and sweet. And she makes it so that people don't feel any pain. But what she does here is inflict immeasurable psychic pain on that kid.
Yep.
She forces him in his dying moments to sit there looking at the body of his mother who he's been caring for while she explains to him how she's going to frame him for her murder. That is fucked up.
And I'll tell you what, another little bit to support my theory of the making the serial killer protagonist a bit more palatable. The fact that the friend who has been a friend for decades and she's now brutally killed, they also, and there's other reasons why this plot point is in there, but it just supports my theory. The fact that the friend is degenerating, is deteriorating mentally and has shakes and can't look after herself. You could look at that aspect of like, yeah, she's killing a friend, but how long did her friend have, or what quality of life was she going to have?
Are we arguing that it's euthanasia at this point? Because I disagree.
I mean, it's obviously not the purpose. 100%.
Yeah.
Well, all I'm saying is it supports my theory of the author orchestrating things to make them more palatable than your typical serial killer character.
I think that is the point at which, like, there is not a shred of humanity left in this character.
Oh, of course. No. I think we're having a little. I think we're having a little crossed wires here. The character's completely remorseless, cold, unfeeling everything. I'm only saying specifically the meta aspect of the author and how they present the character to the audience. I think there's an effort, and fair enough, you disagree. Like, I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm just like having it for the sake of the podcast. All I think is that the authors made certain decisions that very well written because they work hand in hand with presenting the characters cold, meticulous, calculating. But I think they're done also with the added benefit and bonus of being like, well, what they did was, it was bad, but it could have been worse. Or, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like inflicting suffering like that.
I mean, but in that moment, she inflicted immeasurable suffering.
Yeah, on we don't. But very importantly, we don't see the suffering of the friend character, and I think again that's
but her son.
Yeah, no, but he's the antagonist. Like, we want him to suffer, and again, I think this is all.
Do we?
Yeah, because he's the arsehole who's like, fucked up your plans or whatever. Like,
I don't think I want to see anybody dying on the floor with somebody narrating how they're framing them for a murder. That is one of the most sadistic things I've ever seen in print.
No, but what you want to see is the protagonist succeed and the antagonist fail. And the protagonist succeeding over the failure of the antagonist.
I was quite excited to see Samantha arrested and to see her finally breach into that more kind of animalistic aggression when she's arrested and she's charged and she just loses it.
And I should make the point as well, like, what I'm saying as well, it's not like a guaranteed, like, author does this so you feel this. What I'm saying, I think these are attempts to influence the reader in certain ways.
I mean, we've talked about the death of the author theory.
Yes.
So I don't like to speak about authorial intent because I don't think the conversation about authorial intent is that interesting.
I think this is a larger discussion about serial killers' portrayal in fiction, in modern fiction. And this and Dexter are like the two big ones.
But you're getting into authorial intent there, aren't you?
Yes, and also there's a larger conversation about our relationship with fictional serial killers in parallel to real life serial killers fascination. Yeah. But I think when you're following along as a protagonist, and this comes like the audience, like how your relationship with the text. If you're going along with a protagonist, you have to have a certain amount of like, you don't have to agree with them on everything, but you have to have at least a bit of like, in this scenario, I'm rooting for you. You don't have to be on their side or condone their actions, but you at least is like, in this moment, against that antagonist, I pick you. It's kind of like, you remember when Elon Musk and fucking what's his name? Facebook Android.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Forgot, blanked on his name. When they were gearing up for a fight. And everyone, I think, unanimously was like, I hate both of them, but I'm kind of rooting for the Zuck here. Like, because Musk was being a bit of like I'll fight you anywhere. Oh, I can't do then, though. Oh, my mum says I can't fight. But I'll fight you anywhere.
Did hear about this, and I understand where you're coming from there, but the importance in this kind of story is that in more traditional forms of storytelling, you needed a protagonist that you could root for. But this is a more modern form of storytelling where you don't need to be able to root for the protagonist. And so there are moments where I'm impressed by Samantha.
Yeah.
In her ability to deduce things and in her ability to read the environment around her. And that is purely based on the skills that she's learned to survive as a serial killer, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think the fact that she killed her frail and ill friend is something that makes her more sympathetic. And I think that's what you're arguing.
I think she'd be less sympathetic if the friend was completely healthy and fine and was just a pawn in, and she's just a pawn in the game, essentially, between these two serial killers.
I disagree, though. I don't think that makes her more, I mean, if anything, I think that makes her less sympathetic.
I think
killing a frail elderly person, that just feels gross.
But then this becomes the trolley problem, doesn't it? Because then it's like, if you had to, would you rather kill a dear old friend who's very healthy and still has like many years left, or your dear old friend who is showing signs of dementia and probably isn't going to have a very good go of it after this?
But she doesn't have to kill either.
No, but
she made a choice.
I'm not talking about it in character choices. I'm talking about it in the author choosing how you present this character.
But then you're getting back into authorial intent.
Yes.
And I just don't think authorial intent is a particularly interesting conversation because it's not important.
I think for me,
the author is dead.
I find that interesting. I just find that interesting because I'm thinking about, again, like portrayal of these fictional serial killers. And what I think I'm seeing, because I'm not saying they're objectively true. What I think I'm seeing is I'm seeing these machinations behind the scenes of like, oh yeah, they're doing this because it makes them a little more sympathetic than it would if they didn't do this. Do you know what I mean? And I for some reason, I'm like Neo with the Matrix. Like, I'm just seeing this shit that obviously you didn't care to see or weren't interested in. But I find that interesting of like, they're doing what I think are these smart things to.
But I don't think it has that effect. That's the point. I don't see how her killing a frail elderly friend makes her in any way more sympathetic.
But I'm talking about comparatively. Like, and again, I think we're going to go around in circles here. I think you are focused on, fairly enough, you're focused on the text and how you interpret as a reader. I'm going down this route of like what I think the author's done to try and get specific reactions. Not saying they do this and this and you have this reaction. I think like we've had this with like superhero comics and stuff. Like when we did 1602, like I was having this written by Neil Gaiman, great, fantastic writer. I was having this like, why have you done that, Neil? Like, why have you put that in? Like, I'm reading it like that.
Yeah, which I suppose is when we go to the place that we're taught to read books, and not the place that we're taught to read books as in to like physically read language. But when you're in a university doing an English degree is what I'm trying to say. The first thing they teach you is to not focus on authorial intent.
Well, here at the Comic Lyra podcast, we break the rules.
Because of the death of the author theory.
Because we're bad boys.
Have I ever talked about the death of the author theory here?
Yeah, we've talked about it before.
And so,
I'm aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so...
But also, it's just a theory. A book theory.
But no, I mean, I don't know that it functions in that way. And I don't know that actually any reading of it that requires us to think about authorial intent is particularly interesting.
I find that interesting. I find the idea of authors generally across all these kind of texts being like, right, the story's about a serial killer, the most evil, like second most evil out of like, some unspeakable acts, but the one of the most evil sections of society.
Yeah.
Like the monsters in the dark. Like, how do we make that a protagonist?
Yeah.
And all the things they do. And by definition, this is a weird comparison, but like with Shrek, right?
Where are you going?
Shrek is the monster character, the monster ogre.
Yeah.
But then they put on all this, they reveal it's like, no, he is a person, a sentient being with thoughts and feelings underneath, and that's what makes him an interesting character.
Yeah.
With serial killers, the definition of serial killers is what's the term? So it's not sociopath, well, psychopath, but there's the word sociopathy. You know the one.
Yes.
But that making them immediately unrelatable because they don't have these thoughts and feelings that normal characters are relatable with. So I'm fascinated by this. They've done like a lot of texts in recent years have doing this and trying to do this. Like the protagonist is a serial killer. How do we make them more, again, not necessarily likable? You don't have to like a protagonist, but I think you do at least have to root for them in the situation that you're reading. You have to root for their success. And you know
I disagree.
I will concede that I did just have the thought of like, it's not necessarily about rooting for their success. You can just be fascinated by what's happening.
I think what was most interesting to me about Samantha is after the revelation that she's a serial killer, thinking about the moments you've seen her acting as a very functioning member of society beforehand and realizing that was all learnt behavior.
Yeah.
And then seeing her at that funeral say, I'm doing what's expected of me and I'm behaving in a way that would be expected of me in this instance, but really I don't care. And it's seeing somebody that sociopathic wear the mask, and she talks about it really overtly, doesn't she? I've been wearing a mask my entire life, because she is essentially pretending to be a functioning member of society, right? And that is so fascinating.
Yeah.
Watching somebody who so clearly doesn't really understand the rules that govern society, or certainly doesn't think they apply to them, go through and, you know, and pretend, basically, and make believe being not a sociopath.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a worn trope now. Like, for me, a lot of film and TV, this like revitalizes it by
massively,
juxtaposing it with the friendly animal characters and everything. Like, fantastic in that regard. Although I did play a video game like over 10 years ago. I can't remember what it's called. It was called something like Bad Bear or something like that. Yeah. But it was literally like the characters were all teddy bears, and the one you played was a serial killer, and you had to kill the other teddy bears. I can't remember what it's called now.
I'm amazed that didn't get banned.
Yeah, no, it was because it's like dumb fun, isn't it? Like, especially on video games, like there's more once you got past like the GTA and like Manhunt like threshold, it was like, yeah, some places might ban it, but ultimately it's gonna
Manhunt did get banned in Europe though, didn't it?
Parts of Europe, yeah. I mean, we had it here, so didn't get banned here.
Did it not?
No, you could, but I remember seeing it on shelves and stuff. And I, even back then, like younger me, I was looking at that being like, just gratuitous violence. Like, it's not even fun. Like GTA, you run people over, but it's because you can drive cars down streets and go.
GTA was great fun. Yeah. What was the game that did get banned in Europe? Bully. Bully got banned in Europe, didn't it? Or did it get his name changed?
I think it got his name changed because we had it as something like the Institute of or something like that.
Yeah.
Story of Bully or something like that. And I'm just going to find this bear game just to show you the cover of it.
Awesome.
And then we'll wrap up. It was called Naughty Bear, and this is the front cover. Look up Naughty Bear if you're listening.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you said you were just a bear serial killer, and you're an angry bear, and all the other bears are just like obnoxiously like, everything's fun. And you're like, I'm going to kill these motherfuckers. But yeah, so a lot of interesting topic discussion, author talk, and serial killers.
There was one last thing that I found really interesting, and it's just based on how accurate this was, which is the idea of a serial killer going dormant.
Yep.
Because they do. And in, investigative circles, people who investigate these kind of crimes, when a serial killer goes dormant, they either assume A, that they've been bagged and they're in prison for something else, B, that they're dead, or C, fuck, we actually started getting close.
Yeah.
And they've gone dormant. Why have they gone dormant? And right at the end, Samantha says, I'm going to take some time off just to chill out. Just while the heat goes down, I'm going to take some time off. And so she talks about the fact that she's going dormant.
I think I'm going to hibernate for the winter.
There we go. Yeah. There we go. Which is a nice little pun, isn't it?
Yeah.
But again, that's and that was a way. I read that, and it kind of made me ruminate on what I know about serial killers from talking with criminologists mostly. And obviously I've had to learn about these things in a professional capacity in the past. I've had some jobs that have required me not to know about serial killers in detail or in particular.
Just enough to not get caught.
Well, this is it.
Yeah.
You can't say that on the internet. But I then combed back through it, and it's the level of detail that they managed to weave into the way that Samantha commits these crimes. And obviously, there's a really key thing that's happening here that we've not touched on, which is weird for a piece of fiction written in this day and age. And when I say it, you'll probably clock it. No smartphones.
Yeah. It was definitely of an era of like when these children's books were set in.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that smartphones have made many aspects of life easier, but crime way more difficult.
Well, in kind of two ways. It's pros and cons, because on the downside to us, it's the ease of serial killers like drawing in victims.
Yes.
That's how people use like the dating apps and stuff like that. And, so it's pros and cons. Like you can trace on your phone, but also just don't take your phone with you. Like,
yeah, this is it. But then going out for a long period of time without your mobile phone would be seen as really conspicuous nowadays.
But then how else would they know you went out?
Well, this is it. Absolutely.
Yeah. But if they catch you on a camera, you just go, oh, I left my phone at home.
But that's the thing. And to be honest with you, I don't know if it's just because I find phones a bit of a turn off in general, but they have made so much of storytelling. They've taken away so much of the intrigue in stories, because if you have two characters who both have one half of a piece of information, say, and they need to find each other within a time limit, kind of like classic action story stuff. You have the password, I have the MacGuffin, we need to find each other because we need the password and the MacGuffin together. Obviously, you look at that kind of action story now and go, well, you'd just fucking text it to them, wouldn't you?
True. And I think it has to adapt. Like there's pros and cons. Like you can't do that specific thing.
Yeah.
But then you get also stuff like, like antagonists, like in control of a situation, they take people's phones away.
Yeah.
And then that you still get what you've said, but then you get that added like, oh, it's like in this day and age, it's almost like, oh no, you've taken their access to communicate with the world. Like it feels like something that's not natural to us. It's like you've taken something away from this person.
Yeah.
So then that becomes this added like, I haven't got my phone. Like all these other problems are now going to start. So I think it gives an extra dimension that writers have to write around.
Yeah.
And again, this is why I come back to, and maybe I think we are established that we have very different ways of thinking with assessing these kind of texts and stuff. I'm thinking a lot about like, how's the writer doing that? Like how have they pivoted like this way, and what, the situation they've created and stuff. So I think that
don't get me wrong, I'm interested in that stuff as somebody who has written, but when I'm reading a text, it's really important for me that I'm not thinking about that, because again, I just think my interpretation or an interpretation of what they're doing is more exciting to me than trying to work out why they're doing it or what they were trying to achieve.
You know what it is?
Because ultimately what they're trying to achieve is nebulous in comparison with what they've actually put on the page and achieved for me. Yeah. Right?
You know what it is for me? My problem? It's pro wrestling brain. And it's literally like, there's a thing in pro wrestling fandom where like, you have to, this is why we have that thing of like, as marking out, like as a, you were enjoying it so much that you were just full on in the fiction, enjoying the ride. Like that's good. That's a high regard for like a wrestling match. But then the problem is when you're not that, you're thinking a lot about like, okay, if this person wins, then they're probably going to be booked to win over this person. They're probably going to go to face for the title. Like you're thinking about the booking behind the scenes. Yeah. And maybe that's my problem that I've developed through that.
I don't know it's your problem. It's just a difference in the way we approach things.
But I'd like to be, again, I aspire to be just solely sucked in, total suspension of disbelief, just in the text, tunnel vision in. And that's when it is at its best. I guess my issue for me with this is I've read and consumed a lot of that fictional serial killer stuff. I'm not as big on the non-fiction stuff, except Mindhunter. Netflix, that was amazing TV show.
Mindhunter.
Kind of fictionalized, but the true story account or imagining of the character in the FBI who was in like the 60s was the first one to be like, hey, we have serial killers in jail.
Yes, I've seen
There are serial killers out. Let's interview them and try and determine the pattern so we can catch future ones. So that's great. But yeah, because I've seen like, again, Dexter, Hannibal Lecter, all that kind of stuff, I've seen the tropes and I'm kind of connecting the dots a lot more.
Weirdly, I've not consumed as much serial killer fiction, but I have consumed some fiction about some deeply unlikable protagonists. And so, I was kind of in the back of my head, the novel that this was the most similar to, even though it's a completely different topic, was Lolita.
Yes. I mean, that's when I mentioned earlier, I was like, the most unlikable section of society. I was like, well, not the most, but they're up there.
We all knew what you were not saying. And so it's that moment where you have a deeply unlikable protagonist, but they are still your protagonist. And I suppose it's the difference between following somebody and rooting for them, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. And I was kind of thinking along the lines of like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, where the thing with that is you're rooting for these characters because they're kind of, even though they're unlikable at times, the two aspects are, one, they're going up against worse people. Yeah. And I think that's a very common thing with serial killer stuff. They're always up against worse people. And like in this, we like Samantha for, I think you can't help but like her for a competency.
Yeah.
And then you're then faced with the opposite of her, which is a reckless, serial killer is making mistakes and is big showy and doing all the wrong things. Yeah. Like, so that dichotomy, we're like, oh, we like Samantha, we like competency. And so Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul is Walter White Heisenberg is a renowned chemist, and we like that he's like the best at something, despite all the other shit.
Is he a renowned chemist? I thought he was just a high school chemistry teacher.
He's so getting into bloody Breaking Bad law. He is a high school chemistry teacher, but at one point he was a Nobel Prize level, not necessarily winning. I don't think he won one, but he was that level.
But he was a very good chemist. Yeah.
And he got kind of pushed out of the company, and then he maybe slight pothole. I don't know why he had to go to high school teaching. I feel like he could have gone college teacher. Yeah. But I think he needed money urgently. He had a kid on the way, I think, so he was like, I just need a whatever job immediately. And then Better Call Saul, he is a great lawyer. Not your typical, like, in a suit in a courtroom, like, following the rules lawyer. He's like the guy who can talk you out of getting dismembered by the cartel.
Yeah, like I saw a clip from Better Call Saul where he basically he questioned a witness and made them positively ID the defendant. And then the defendant wasn't actually in the stand, he was at the back, and he said, well, you didn't recognize him either. And it was like, it can't, he basically completely discredited a witness by making them give a full-on positive ID on the wrong person, right? Yeah. And I thought that was pretty fucking rad.
One of the
that actor as well,
Bob Odenkirk.
Yeah, so I only really remember him as being Marshall's boss in How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah,
which makes it really hard to take him seriously because I just think about Tugboat the dog.
And another great clip for that, which is kind of the epitome of Better Call Saul, is he talks these two skaters. He's doing like a con with them, and they accidentally do the con on like a psychotic cartel killer, basically. Nice. Tuco, for anyone who's watching. Ariel Samantha, yeah. And the guy's like, right, you fuck off, like, you never, if you tell him about us, we'll kill you. And he's like, all right, I'm out. And he's like, what are you going to do to these boys, though? These, like, teenagers. So we're going to kill them. And he's like, maybe don't do that. And he talks this killer, this cartel assassin, basically, psychotic, down from murder to just breaking one leg each. But he negotiates back and forth on the number of legs. Yeah. And the way he does it, it's a great scene because he points out, it's like, they disrespected your mother and that's why you feel you need to kill them. He's like, yeah. He's like, but they also have a mother. And their mum would be really as upset as yours was if her sons died. They are idiots. They deserve what they get, but she doesn't deserve that. And he's like, well, I need to do something. He's like, and then you can see Jimmy, the character, he's like working out like what buttons to push. Yeah. And that's his skill. And he's not appealing to like humanity or anything, but he appeals to like the guy's sense of self-worth. He's like, well, I get it. You're the judge of this scenario, but like a judge, you need to be firm, but fair. And he's like playing to us like, and that's the mark of a good judge. And you can see like when it starts working and he like prods that line more. Yeah. And that's the negotiator's like, all right, I'll just break their legs. And he's like, it's like, how about just one leg each? He's like, one leg? It's like, it firm but fair. And he's like, one leg. He's like, fine. And afterwards, the guys get their legs broken and they are assholes. And then they're like, we broke our legs. You're the worst lawyer ever. He's like, I'm the best lawyer ever. I talked you down from the death penalty. Like, I'm the best. Anyway, I think we've gone long. We could talk in circles about morality of all this bollocks.
I mean, we've not gone that long. We've gone about average.
We normally go for like hour 20 or hour 15, and we've got an hour and a half. Also, it's really hot in here.
Yeah.
So that's another reason.
Right, so thank you for listening. This has been a weird one because we've been talking about serial killers for an hour and a half. So I appreciate you getting through to this point in it.
I mean, knowing I like this would be like the best viewed episode.
Yeah, just fucking something will click on the SEO.
I feel like the title should be something like The Morality of Serial Killer Protagonists. I feel like that might be better than like BoJack meets Dexter. Like, I think it'll be better.
I think it's the right creative choice.
Yes.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Sometimes we have to balance the creative choice over the SEO. It's like, do we want more people to see the thing, or do we want to just hold true to what the thing actually was when we made it, right?
I think in this instance it does both.
Yeah, I think so. So thank you so much for listening to us ruminate about serial killers. If you'd like to leave a comment and spark a discussion about this one, you can do so. We have a YouTube channel where we post these things. We also post shorts. You can leave a review wherever you get your podcasts from. You can even send us an email at comicliterate@gmail.com.
Also, a couple of comments that I thought would be good to bring up.
Oh, comments.
There was one which I am locating right now. I thought I had more than one, but the one I could find, which I thought was especially worth mentioning, was on the Star Wargashboard episode, where I specifically titled it as Star Wargashboard, like Smorgasbord, but with Star Wars comics instead of cheese. And someone commented, "It's not funny if you have to explain it." And to them, I say, absolutely right.
Yeah, it wasn't funny at the time.
You've nailed it. Nailed it in one. We appreciate your commentary.
Thank you so much for acknowledging that.
And I'm not going to change.
The negative, honestly, it's the bad comments that make my day.
Absolutely.
I love the hate comments. They just make me so much happier.
And if you're listening and you're hating, more.
Yeah, just bring it on. Lay it on me, brother.
We should probably start asking at the start of the episode, so I feel like the haters don't listen to the end. So, but they might tune in at the start. So maybe next week we'll open with like, and if you hate this, tell us.
Because we like it.
Yeah.
We're gluttons.
No, because if we tell them, they might not do it. Like a serial killer, they need us to be unwilling victims.
Yeah, how'd you ask for hate comments?
Do reverse psychology. Don't send hate comments.
Well, that's it, isn't it?
Oh, no.
Because to be honest with you, hate comments are really good for the algorithm.
Oh, yeah. Fun.
They're fucking great for the algorithm.
Yeah. Fouls are fun.
Thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye.